Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching by Rabbi-Cantor Chorny.
I'm trying to think if anybody who was here was also at my Shabbat morning teaching this morning, but I think two people were. Okay. I kind of wanted to reteach it because I was having so much fun with it. I could have taught it 4 times over. It was one of those great set of sources on the topic of the twins who were rotzitzim in the belly, and Rivka seeking a prophecy. And the reason I mention it is that I think there's a pretty deep connection between that and what I'd like to study this afternoon about revelation, about a sense of revelation. So in my Shabbat morning teaching today, I shared this notion of oracle and prophecy and mediated prophecy. In short, sorry to spoil it, but I guess it's not recorded anywhere, so I'm not spoiling anything. I'll share with you if you weren't here for it, that the notion of direct prophecy may have been very uncomfortable to our rabbinic forebears because of 2 limitations. One is that it would seem that when one if one needed to receive prophecies directly from God, then the likelihood of ever hearing God's voice again is much slimmer than if it might be possible that there are people on this planet who have open pathways to God, whether in the form of an ancient oracle or the form of someone who feels that they have or has ascribed to them the power of nu'uah, the power of prophecy, that if those people walk this planet, then it's many times multiply the possibility that we'll encounter a teaching directly from God, because God does not appear to speak to human beings directly anymore. But it does seem as though there's a godly way that's manifest through certain people and certain teachings in the world. So I think that's part of the discomfort that they're wrestling with, no pun intended, lots of wrestling in these parshas. And then the second thing is this idea that prophecies or visions are exceedingly hazy and quite cryptic, in that it's not possible to understand a prophecy until the end of one's life and looking back. And I made a nice wicked reference in the notion of the Wicked Witch of the West, as Stephen Schwartz very Jewishly characterizes her. She celebrates in a song at the very beginning of the show, "Though the vision is hazy, it seems that one day there'll be a celebration all throughout Oz to do with me." Of course, that celebration is the celebration of her death. Ding dong, the witch is dead, for all who have seen Wizard of Oz. But she has the vision, this hazy vision, that she's going to be celebrated. It's just she can't know until after she's gone that celebration will be a celebration of relief that the Wicked Witch of the West is dead. So both of these notions are alive and well already. I was analyzing them in the past parsha, this idea that visions themselves often do not come unmediated, but rather mediated through prophecy and oracle, and also, and dream, which will become relevant here, and also this idea that visions and prophecies do not necessarily come with any sense of clarity, but rather are understood after the fact with a great deal of sharpness of hindsight.
It's also, remember, they're the rabbi's rival. In other words, the rabbinic authority is the authority of interpretation.
Right.
They have, and that is an indirect authority from the divine
right.
revelation. And if they get it directly from the divine, and you have that with the oven of
Tanor. Of the oven of Tanor. Of Achnai.
Yeah. Oven. In other words, the rabbis don't want that rival.
That's right.
For authority.
Right. So this is also a political issue within Israel. That's right. So it's a political issue within the Jewish people as well, because the notion that there's a limitation to the power of the prophets is helpful for the balance of power within the people, because, of course, the rabbinic people want the rabbinic authority of any generation wants ultimately for the interpretive authority to rest with them. And how do they get their authority? Study. Now, We're going to leave that logical, wonky readership land and enter back directly into the notion of dreamy interpretations and revelation, which is where we'll be for this Parsha Vayeitze and all the way through the story of Joseph, of course, because Joseph, too, is one who is given revelatory dreams and prophecies. By the way, similar to I'm still going to be proud of this Wicked reference, but similar to this pop culture reference in Wicked, right? Of course, Joseph's visions as well seem very clear to him, but in hindsight, they aren't at all what they were at first. That clarity of vision doesn't even come into play before our main character in Vayeitze becomes very uncomfortable with the vision that he's been given. Where is Jacob when he has a vision of angels and a ladder and everything that's referenced at the beginning of Parshat Vayeitze? Where is he? He's in a place called Beit-El or Bethel. And what is he doing while he receives this vision? He's asleep. So we hear about the vision. We're actually witness with a narrative voice to the vision that he has. And then he awakens, but he doesn't awaken relieved or happy. We don't know what Rivka's response was to the revelation, but there is a presumed contentedness as if the text has answered the question that we know that she has. What's happening in my belly? Oh, there are two nations fighting. By the way, I don't know how content I would be if that was the explanation that I got, but at least it would have given her an explanation. Yaakov has a deep, whatever the opposite of satisfaction is, he has perhaps a deep distress about this revelation. But the distress at the revelation isn't because of the content of what he's told. He's not being told that something is going to happen that's so disturbing that he can't stand it. Instead, he's uncomfortable about the way that he received this revelation. I want us to sit in that discomfort with him, and we're going to use the Or HaChaim to give us a little bit of clarity on what that discomfort might be. And we're going to follow that line all the way down into this idea of the state that we're supposed to be in when we are encountering God. Or HaChaim. So when Yaakov says, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, there is God in this place. Backing up a second to the verse, 28th chapter, 16th verse, Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato, Jacob woke up from his sleep state. Vayomer, and he said, Achen. And what can Achen mean? I would usually translate it as thus. But here, there's something else happening. What does the translation tell us here? Surely. So why does it say surely and not thus? It seems that Achen is meant to be an intensifier, we would call it an intensifier, or something that underscores the intensity of the experience, as if it were. It's not quite onomatopoeia, but as if it were an exclamation, Achen, right? Sure, like as if it were an intense expression of emotion. Achen, Yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh. God is in this place. Va'anochi lo yadati, and I did know or didn't know. Did not know. Lo yadati, and I didn't know. So what would you expect if somebody woke up from a dream with the visions that Jacob was given? The angels ascending the ladder, descending the ladder. What are the range of emotions that one might experience awakening from what appeared to be a divine prophecy or revelation to him? Well, he says I screwed up. What are our other options besides I screwed up, Irv?
Do I need to go see a doctor?
And I want to go see a doctor. What's happening?
I want to see a therapist.
Or a therapist. Okay, good. What else? Yeah, Warren? I want to know what it means, right? Maybe go and run to somebody who can help you interpret it.
Well, but there may be another explanation, which is that his concept of God was linked to the land. And here he's leaving the land, but there is still God.
Right, so what Michael's pointing out is that there's a discomfort that he's leaving the land and God seems to be present, and all the way up and through the prophet the prophetic book that we have about Jonah, there is an abiding sense that God actually exists is actually linked to place. It's only after the book of Jonah, which is very late, that we get this notion that God can be present in places other than the place, hamakom, or in the place in which Israelites are dwelling. So that might be really that might be putting him in a shaky place. What else might I'm gonna?
He also is in a shaky place. In other words, he's going into exile. He's leaving his home. He has a brother who might kill him. He's going to a place unknown.
He's in a shaky place. He's on a journey.
It's the opposite of Abraham's sense, in which God tells him to take the journey. And I'm going to make something of you.
Right.
This is the opposite. I'm going and I've lost everything.
So Abraham gets this revelation, and it's a certainty that Abraham can carry forward with a sense of fortitude because God has told him to go forward. He's doing what God has told him to do. Jacob, on the other hand, is on his way to what might be a very violent reunion with a very angry twin, and he's in a very shaky place. And I don't know what kind of dreams you all have when you're in a very stressed state, but I imagine that this is the kind of dream that one might have. I'll say opposite of that. This is one of the few fear. Oh yeah, sure, Joel.
God says, "I will protect you."
God says, "I will protect you." That's correct. And can you tell people what page they can follow along in the? You have the Eitz Chaim there, or different? Do you have the Eitz Chaim there?
No. He says,
Tell him what page. What?
The page.
Oh, okay. I'm not in this. I'm not
In 167. All right, we got a reference point here. Great. So we got it. 167, Joel. So he says, God says, I'm with you. I will protect you.
Yeah.
Right.
So, it seems like if somebody is worried and nervous, and then God's self says, "Don't worry, I'm here for you. I'll protect you.
Sure.
It's going to be okay." So I don't know why you would wake up in a panic or be disturbed. It's a wonderful, warm feeling you should have.
Great. So this is where I am too, Joel. It's a wonderful, warm feeling he should have. It's Thanksgiving weekend, so the word gratitude is on the brain. I'll just say I might have a bit of gratitude that I was chosen to be the recipient of a revelation, a vision, a dream that connected me directly to God. It's still the very rare case that anyone would get a vision. And I wonder in their family, the lore of the generations of the family, if there was a question mark within each of the next birthright holders, by rights or by not rights, if they wondered, will God ever speak to me? I imagine I would experience a great deal of relief at God finally speaking with me. But that's definitely not the experience that the narrator of our text lets us know by giving us an actual quote from Yaakov, who says, God was in this place and I did not know it. Pause on that for a second, parenthetically. It's possible that we're reading those emotions into it. It's possible that the surprise is quite joyful. No? Oh my God, God was in this place. And I didn't even know it. Is that possible, Warren?
I'm not. Okay. I'll tell you what was intriguing to me was that he slept on a stone.
It's intriguing to Warren that he slept on a stone.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think there's some significance to that that's going to answer your question.
Sure.
I don't know what it is. There's something about, it's not very comfortable to sleep on a stone. You said he had a headache when he woke up, but maybe God actually put him into a trance and he didn't sleep.
Right. Maybe God did put him into a trance and it wasn't sleep at all. And maybe that was unsettling to him. Maybe the stone itself, right, was the unsettling thing.
God wanted him to be unsettled, and the stone is symbolic of something that's unsettling. Something hard.
All of these things make sense to me. The hardness of a stone, the discomfort, all makes sense to me in terms of the way that I would directly read the text. The rabbinic figures from about the 5th or 6th century onward seem to think that the distress comes from a place that we haven't yet mentioned, which is a distress that he had not properly prepared for this revelation, that he did not come prepared for this revelation, which is a very interesting and specific kind of distress. I think it's like the 1,000 times more powerful distress of showing up to synagogue and thinking it's fine that you're just there in jeans, and then someone invites you to get up and lead or take an aliyah, right? You're like, I didn't even know I'd be asked to take an aliyah, and here I am in jeans. I can't think of any other comparative experience there, or perhaps, more pointedly, like at such an experience at, say, the Kotel or something. But this idea that he came and he wasn't prepared is very distressing to him. The Or HaChaim, I'll do some of the text in Hebrew and some in English. I'll skip to over a few parts of the Or HaChaim here. When Jacob said, Yesh Hashem ha'makom hazeh, God's in this place, he meant that God is present here in this place all the time. Other places, that's not true. This is why God wanted Jacob to spend the night there, in order to communicate with him there. But Jacob, he apologized for not having prepared himself for divine revelation. Had he been aware of the significance of this site, he would surely have done so. And then the Or HaChaim makes an assertion. Prophecy requires that the recipient of that prophetic message is prepared mentally. Prophecy requires preparation. And maybe the worry comes from the fact that if Jacob had prepared himself to become a recipient of this message, then he wouldn't have been, it would have been ve'efshar im haya mechin atzmo, if he had actually prepared himself properly, then perhaps he wouldn't have been asleep when the revelation came. Maybe he wouldn't have gone to sleep if he knew it was such a holy site, right? It's like, why would I take a nap in such a place where I'm going to get a revelation from God? I wouldn't go to sleep. Instead, I would have been awake for this prophecy if I had prepared myself right. And then I might have been awake. Perhaps this is what's being bemoaned in this verse. And I brought the Or HaChaim because it also quotes Rashi, our 11th to 13th century commentator, who explains that Jacob meant that if he had known the holy nature of that site, he wouldn't have gone to sleep whatsoever. And if that were the only meaning of Jacob's words, that we could say to Rashi that Jacob then would not have experienced all the promises God made to him during his dream. So in other words, there's a little bit of a tension between these 2 points. On the one hand, maybe he should have been awake and prepared himself to receive this prophecy, and he shouldn't have slept on it. But on the other hand, what? Why is it so important that he slept? Because maybe he needed to be asleep to receive the prophecy. And that's what I want to explore together. Maybe the sleep was the important part. Maybe he was supposed to be asleep all along. And that feeling that we've done something wrong, but in fact, we've been doing exactly what was needed all along, is a very, very familiar feeling. I think it's also known as Jewish guilt, right? The notion that I did something very, very wrong, even when the evidence is quite to the contrary. That's where I want us to sit with this. The evidence is to the contrary. He did receive a prophecy from God, and yet he wakes up immersed in guilt, apparently. But what if he was supposed to be asleep? And that's how one receives a prophecy. A brief pause on the Shnei Luchot Abrit, who has something very interesting to offer on this point, and says that there is a hint in this verb, yud, shin, kaf, bet, in this laying down. What is that verb? Where do we know that verb from? What is that verb about? Yud, shin, kaf, bet. What is that? Shchiva. What is this? It's a... Right. It's yud, shin. And it's the idea of, right, oh, that's interesting, that with an ayin in there, it would be like Yaakov, kind of. Yeah, we've got the kof, but still. Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's the notion of sleepiness, right, of laying down and of sleepiness. But it doesn't just mean that. That's what I'm digging at. Later on in the Torah, what is this verb going to come to have meaning? What other meaning is acquired by this word? When one lays down with someone. not just sex, but something even more so. Are there any weddings in the Torah? Apparently. Are there any weddings? There is a mention of divorce. Any mention of wedding? Right. You literally lay with someone as a means of acquisition, right? So there's something really intimate about this laying down. Literally, it refers to an intimacy. And in fact, the Shni Luchot Brit is going to infer that the notion of that laying down and the trading of the mandrakes and then having that extra night, that basically that's a connection with Leah, this notion of the laying down being a means to receive something very important, right? I won't get into the graphic nature of things, but basically laying down is also an act of receiving, because this is how the seed of Israel is proliferated. But in addition to that, he offers that there is a little bit of a hint in this Vayashkev or Vayashkov, that this idea that's present in there is a little bit of an acronym. Yesh Sachar. Yesh Sachar. And what is Sachar? There is a reward. Okay, Yesh Sachar. So when one lays down, that one is privy to some sort of a reward. And what is the inference? That there is some sort of a reward and a laying down for Jacob? What is his reward? He lays down, and what does he get? He lays down, and what does he receive overnight? A prophecy, a vision, a connection to the divine. So the rabbinic voices on this text want to come and counter or comfort, or both, Jacob's apparent panic. If, in fact, there is panic in the verse, oh my gosh, I didn't even know it, I wasn't prepared, I should have been prepared for the prophecy. What the rabbis want to come to do is to say, no. The later you get, the more deeply you get into Kabbalistic and Musar voices, the more strong this sort of counter-narrative emerges, that it's in fact the exact thing that one needs to do, to lay down and to receive a prophecy and to be in a kind of dream state. Does anyone know what musicians call it when they sit down at their instrument and the music just starts to come out of them? Is anyone familiar with that?
Jam session.
What's that?
It's jam session. I say improvising.
Improvising or a jam session. But what do you call that moment in improvising or a jam session when you stop thinking and the music just starts coming? Flow. That's exactly right. They call it flow. And I don't know if anybody here knows this, but my degree before I came here from American University, go Eagles, my degree is in jazz studies. So I study a lot about the history of jazz, and flow is an inherent spiritual notion that comes out of mostly the African American community, but actually out of a marriage of the African American community and the Jewish community as they produced this sound that emerged from spirituals and eventually gets into the height of jazz. Really, jazz peaks, climaxes in like 60s and 70s. And in that time, flow emerges as a kind of semi-spiritual state. Flow is a way of being present to a moment that asks you to leave the logical aside. Stop reading the notes on the page and let the music just flow. Psychedelics in the 1960s and 70s also contributed to this notion that the more that one could leave the angst of being present in the body, the more that one could give oneself over to the presence in that spirituality of the music just coming, that the music itself, like a prophecy, would come through and be able to be present through someone's fingers, right, on a trumpet or on a piano.
Yeah, but musicians, composers have experienced both agony and ecstasy. They've experienced both ends of it. Great music has been composed where it didn't exactly flow. They really had to struggle with it themselves.
That's exactly right, Rosa. Flow is not guaranteed. Great musicians struggle. That's absolutely right. So how do you get to that flow state? I'm going to argue that going into a dream state, laying oneself down, is the closest act we have of completely giving ourselves over to the flow of the universe. Because when we, as we say in Adon Olam B'yado Afkid Ruchi, when we just tuck our souls into the hands of God and say, I'm going to sleep, what dreams may come, right? What dreams may come may become great revelations. Yeah, Warren.
Well, I will say that I've had amazing dreams where I've heard like amazing music, symphonies and everything.
Yeah.
And then I woke up and I said, that was my dream.
Right. Right. You've dreamt great symphonies while asleep, while in a completely unencumbered and unburdened state. You didn't know if it was coming from somewhere else or perhaps even from within you. And I'll say, I think that too is the great fear. I was going to leave this for the very end, but I'll say I think that this perhaps is the great fear of Jacob, that if there is any fear present, it's that having this revelation in a dream leaves him with the question mark as to whether it was a dream or a revelation. Presumably, like all human beings, Jacob dreamt all the time. Don't we all dream, at least on occasion? And I imagine there would be a great deal of anxiety never quite knowing if it was a dream or a prophecy. And that had he been awake for that prophecy, he would have known because he wouldn't have been asleep. And perhaps that's a little bit what's being hinted at here. I want to move us to the last sources so that we can then bench and do Mariv in time, though it feels like 10 p.m. and it's only 5:06. Briefly, Rabbi Menachem Nachum, great name, of Chernobyl, who lived till just about the cusp of the 19th century, mentions something about when flow does not come. He doesn't call it flow, but when this connection to the divine does not come. And he says the greatest example that we have of this as a people is when we were leaving Egypt. Because, of course, Mitzrayim refers to Metzar, which is a narrowness and a narrow opening place, a place of great narrow, he says narrow da'at. The people's consciousness or awareness, their da'at, was diminished like the sea itself, like the narrow sea, Metzar Yam. For the stream of awareness that flows from the sea of wisdom, Rabbi Jonathan Slater translated this, but I thank him and thanked him for such a brilliant connection to this idea of flow. Stream of awareness that flows from the sea of wisdom was constricted and diminished, and they had not yet achieved an expansive consciousness. But with Yetziat Mitzrayim, they came out of that narrow place, and their consciousness of God grew and expanded. It was an expansiveness that grew in that place. So where does flow not come through? In great narrowness and closed-mindedness and a feeling of distance from the divine. Where does flow just flow? In that great expansiveness.
That's why it's involved with sleep. Because sleep, Freud's whole notion is it suspends all of the restraints.
Exactly. Freud's notion, as Michael points out, is the suspension of restraint, and that sleep is a great time of deep personal understanding and reflection for all the reasons that we're mentioning, because the defenses are all down and one can simply let the flow in. Rabbi Shefa Gold, who most people know from her chants, including Ozi Vizim Ratya, on this very notion of leaving the sea, leaving the narrowness of Egypt, she writes about Vayeitze, Jacob's journey is blessed at its outset with a dream and with a moment of awakening. In the dream, God shows Jacob the stairway that connects the realms of heaven and earth and then gives him a promise. Through this blessing, we ourselves become that stairway, she says, that connection, with our feet planted in the foundation of the earth and our crowns open to the expanse of heaven. Through us, the divine flow pours down into the earthly realms. Through us, the pleasure and miseries of earthly experience are offered up to the divine expanse. When I become available to this flow, this is Shefa speaking herself as a teacher of mindfulness, I am awakened to the most awesome and transformative truth. God was here all along, and I didn't know it. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And by this, she means her. Her presence is that gate. In this very moment and this place here where I stand is at once God's home and the doorway to all realms. Our journey brings us the blessing of Zeh, this. In becoming fully present to this moment here and now, the presence of God is revealed. In there, you hear the tension that she is presenting to us that I think is the ultimate human tension when it comes to accessing the divine. Because, of course, at the end, what does she say? It's in becoming fully present to this moment here and now. But what's the opposite of being fully present to this moment here and now? Going to sleep or letting things go completely and giving oneself over to the flow. It is the human tension of being in that state of knowing oh, I knew that this was going to be a place where I would get a prophecy, and the giving over entirely that lets that godness and that divineness flow right in. Finally, closing up with Aviva Zornberg as a means of kavanah, of intentionality for Ma'ariv. She has a brilliant teaching. I brought Aviva, I think, a few weeks ago for us to learn from, or maybe that was a Shabbat morning teaching, but I've been reading her texts, particularly preparing for Pesach this year. Like, I'm starting early. And she writes something that is meant to inspire us to take a completely different look at what Ma'ariv, Aravit, is as a service. Why Ma'ariv and why this Parsha? Who is meant to be the progenitor, the inventor, the person who is connected most with Ma'ariv? Well, we'll see in a second. The night at Bethel is the heart of his journey, the dream interim between Be'ersheva and Haran. There he dreams and wakens with the words, "Surely God is in this place, and I did not know." He wakens, that is, with a deep conviction that he did not know. He has brushed against a knowledge that could only arise from the way of ignorance. In such profound shifts of experience, the revelation is the not knowing. The sense of previous darkness itself intimates a dawning light. In a startled moment, Jacob recognizes the shape of his own ignorance. Surely God is this place. Why is it so unexpected that God should be in this place? What strange beauty has just touched him? Mount Moriah becomes a place in Jacob's mind, uncannily overwhelming him, just as the sudden sunset becomes his personal syncope, a kind of blackout, which moves him to a new genre of prayer, Aravit, the evening prayer, the prayer said in darkness. This is the place he unwittingly bypassed on his journey. How could I have forgotten to pray? In other words, what Aviva Zornberg says is the thing, how did he not know? What is the not knowing? A sudden realization that he hadn't taken a moment to say a few prayers. And this, she says, is the moment of inventing Aravit. I suggest that for Jacob, the Akedah, that traumatic memory, is the unreachable place. His prayers cannot find inspiration in the thought of that terror. But having unwittingly traveled past Mount Moriah, guilt assails him. How could I have passed by the place where my fathers prayed without praying there? He sets himself to return and finds himself abrasively hurtling against that place, that darkness. A new prayer is born, Aravit, which represents an unimaginable possibility that divine light can be revealed in the dark. The world of darkness, of sleep and dream, of loss of consciousness, vulnerability, passivity, all of this is associated with the Akedah and his father's helplessness, from which he has long recoiled. Arvit, Ma'ariv service, the one that we're about to say after we bench Birkat Hamazon, is in a category of prayer called Reshut. In other words, it's not optional, but it's not optional. It exists in a time where the core elements of it might have been said in other times and other places. In other words, if we're saying Shema twice a day, why not just say Shema when we go to sleep? The why not is this teaching. The why not is our historical sensibility that we can't pass by an opportunity, an important opportunity to pray, and that we take advantage of the evening time, a time where darker thoughts creep in and perhaps traumas return to us and we feel more vulnerable, and those nights get longer this time of year, even as we're reading Parshat Vayeitze. And we give ourselves over to a sense of flow state because we can let go of the objective named necessity of praying, the Shacharit and the Mincha services, which are such core services to the obligations that we need to pray. We just have to pray. We got to pray in the morning. We got to pray in the afternoon. But in the evening, we need prayer. We need to pray, representative of the entirety of this amazing divine experience that Jacob had, and a moment of thought that how could he have been past such an important place? How could he find himself in such a vulnerable state and not having taken time to actually reach out and pray? I hope that you find yourself occasionally, perhaps tonight even, using Aravit, using Ma'ariv, and using the evening time as a place for wild wanderings of your consciousness, to let things just go. Maybe that means sitting at the piano and letting music flow out and seeing what comes as dream state comes closer and closer to the evening. Or maybe it means literally that Ma'ariv is a time where you permit yourself to wander much more as you're in that prayer state, more so than you would in a Shacharit or a Mincha service, giving yourself over and getting that much closer in a connection to those ancestors of ours who found themselves inadvertently in the presence of God.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.